was in my early 40s with a lot of life before me. And a moment came that stopped me on a dime. I spent most of the next days looking at the x-rays, talking about the options and talking about sweet time. I asked him when it sank in, this might really be the real end. How's it hit you when you get that kind of news? Man, what you do? And he said, I went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I went 2.7 seconds on a bull named Blue Mansion, and I loved deeper, and I spoke sweeter, and I gave forgiveness I could deny it. And he said, someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying. He said I was finally the husband, but most of the time I wasn't. And I became a friend would like to have. And all of a sudden going fishing wasn't such an imposition. And I went 3 times that year, I lost my dad. Well, I finally read the good book, and I took a good long hard look at what I'd do if I could do it all again. And then I went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I went 2.7 seconds on a bull named Blue Mansion, and I loved deeper, and I spoke sweeter, and I gave forgiveness I could deny it. And he said, someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying. Like tomorrow was a gift and you got eternity. Think about what you do with it. What did you do with it? What did I do with it? What would I do with it? Skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I went 2.7 seconds on the bull named Blue Mansion, and I loved deeper, and I spoke sweeter, and I watched the eagle as it was flying. And he said, someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying. 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 To live like you were dying.
Okay, you made us all cry.
Trunty's crying. Yeah.
Especially if you know the rest of the story.
So that's over 20 years old.
Uh-huh.
That's a classic now, in car terms, right? And I do appreciate Tim McGraw. I appreciate performers. I will say that the older I get, the more I appreciate songwriters.
Amen.
People who are able to take life and and the moments that happen and turn them into poetry, and then set that to music, and then let Tim McGraw sing it. Now that's something. And this was written by Craig Wiseman and James Timothy Nichols. He goes by Tim, as so many of us go by our middle names. Well, Jim already said, if you know the rest of the story, this was a real incident that happened. Wiseman and Nichols had a friend who received that diagnosis. And he spent most of the next day. And that testing went further and further, and he had to recalibrate his entire life. And he had to reprioritize things. It wound up being a birth defect. And so, it was a misdiagnosis. He was granted life. But this is what Wiseman says in an interview. They were talking with their friend. We just started talking about people who responded in that type of way. Wow, his friend said, it's time to get busy. As opposed to, I'm going to go lay down in my bed and freak out. At some point, we knew there was a song there. I mean, they're songwriters. They're looking for material all the time. You get a situation like this, there's a song there. And Wiseman says, I think I mumbled, yeah, you needed to live like you were dying. And Tim said, that's it. And from that moment, you couldn't stop the song. They said it came and just wrote itself. They stayed up talking on the phone late at night, the two of them working out those lyrics, because when something hits a creative person, it just has to come out and have a life of its own. Now, that's one of the things they were accused of. They said, why would you write such a morbid song?
That's not morbid.
The song says dying over and over and over. And they say, this song isn't about dying at all.
Living.
It's about living. It's about living, and it's about living in such a way that you are a better husband. That you're the type of friend someone would want to have. That's amazing. That spending time with people you love isn't such an imposition anymore. To read the Bible. To understand, to attempt to understand some of those eternal truths that drive a believer in God. Yeah, like that. This morning, we're going to pick right up with where Jim was going. None of this was thought of ahead of time, but we're going to take a look in John chapter 20. And we're going to read together verses 19 through 29 in John chapter 20. On the evening of that day, the first day of the week, Sunday, the doors being locked where the disciples were for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said to them, Shalom, peace be with you. When he had said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples were glad when they saw the Lord. And Jesus said to them again, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, even so I am sending you. And when he had said this, he breathed on them, And he said to them, receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they are forgiven them. If you withhold forgiveness from any, it is withheld. Now Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, hey, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand into his side, I will never believe. 8 days later, first day of the week, Sunday, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, Shalom. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here and see my hands, and put your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe. Thomas answered him, my Lord and my God. And Jesus said to him, have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. Thomas had walked with Jesus and those disciples for the last 3 years. Thomas had heard Jesus speak as one who has authority. Thomas witnessed Jesus heal. He witnessed Jesus cast out demons. He witnessed Jesus control the elements. He heard all of those teachings, and he had some belief in his heart. But even here, he's covered by Matthew 16, in that when Peter had said his great confession, you're the Messiah, you're the Son of God, Thomas was there. And look what happens right after that. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples. What did he show them? He showed them that he must go to Jerusalem. Well, Thomas lived it. He believed that he must suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and the scribes. Thomas experienced that. No problem believing that. And be killed. Thomas saw that. Lived it. And on the third day, be raised. And Thomas said,
That's the part he had trouble with.
that's
This is where we part ways.
That's where we part ways. Thank you. That ship sailed. That's a bridge too far. I refuse to believe in the bodily resurrection. I mean, Jesus said in his parables, a seed has to die and be buried and then grow. Tear this temple down, and in 3 days I'll rebuild it. He showed him over and over, this is exactly, Thomas, this is exactly, but he didn't understand. He didn't understand. Not just anybody's word to take, hear. All the disciples who he had lived with and eaten with and walked with, they came to him and said, hey, Thomas, we have seen the Lord. Mary saw him. His mother saw him. Peter, John, they saw him. 2 men on the road to Emmaus spent hours with him, ate a meal with him. They saw him. And Thomas says, nope, Not buying it. Not buying it. That wasn't enough for Thomas. And they told him, how emphatic would it have been? Thomas is not there that first day of the week, but during the week you've seen him and you say to him, you won't believe what happened Sunday. You won't believe this. We saw the Lord. He said, you're right, I don't believe you. That's exactly right. I don't believe you. What did Jesus do for the disciples that were there? Yeah. Yeah. That first Sunday that we're talking about, when Jesus had said, calm down, everybody. I know I startled you. Peace be with you. He shows them. He shows them his hands. And he shows them his side. And they were glad. And life's not fair. Life's not fair. And Thomas wants it to be fair. You see, Thomas doesn't think up this touch the hand by himself. Jesus had already done that for the other 10. Thomas is just asking for what they got. You know what, God? You gave it to those disciples. I want that for myself. Unless you let me do it also. I want this to be fair. If I'm supposed to believe in it, I want to touch your hands and the mark of those nails. I want to put my hand into your side. And we say, he's doubting. What's doubting? I doubt the Bucks are going to win the Super Bowl. Right?
Not believing.
It's not believing, but there's a chance. They could. Doubting's kind of iffy, right? I doubt I'll do this. I doubt that. Thomas doesn't doubt. Thomas is adamant. Thomas says, listen, if this doesn't happen, I will doubt. He says, I will never believe. Never. There's no doubt in Thomas's mind. He's set.
But Chuck, how
Yes.
are the apostles different from Thomas? Because they did the same thing when he was buried. They left. They went back to work.
They did it before he was buried.
Yes.
They're just a week ahead of them. That's
Yeah.
the only difference.
We're going right back to the supper. None of them understood. And all of them had their world rocked. You know? They didn't believe Mary when she came in. We're not going to believe that. They didn't believe the 2 men from the road to Emmaus. It was an issue for all of them to come through, wasn't it? Thomas isn't there yet. I want to look at how this story is laid out for us and how we have this repetition. And I believe it's done on purpose. In verse 19, the evening of that day, the first day of the week, the doors being locked where the disciples were for fear of the Jews. We lock our doors. We lock our doors for fear of the evil that's out there. Jesus could have met them outside on the asphalt. Right? Jesus could have met them out in the vestibule, right outside the front door, and just walked in with them, couldn't he? This was done on purpose.
It would have been less.
They were inside, the doors were shut, and the doors were locked. Why did they have reason to fear? Because they had just crucified Jesus. And we weren't so worried about the Romans at this point. They were worried about the Jews that had killed Jesus. Look, the Romans knew they had chopped the head off the snake. That's what law enforcement does. If they're dealing with a riot, we don't arrest everybody at the riot. they grab the head of the snake, take him down and arrest him, and then everything else is going to quell out. That's how Rome is looking at this situation. That's not how the spiritual leaders were looking at it. They were still very nervous about these followers. So they had reason to fear the Jews. So they've locked the doors. Now what does Jesus do? He comes in. Miracle? Yes. Stood amongst them and said, calm down. It's okay. Now, verse 26, we got the week goes by. His disciples inside that same room is probably a house like this, Monty. And they locked those doors, but this time Thomas was with them. And Jesus does exactly for Thomas what he did for the others. He comes right in again and stood amongst them. And says the exact same thing 1 week later. You see how he's repeating that for Thomas. And says, peace be with you. And then says to Thomas, put your fingers here. Calls him out. Brings the receipts. Says, you want to touch that? Touch it. I'm not a ghost. Did they believe in ghosts? Yes. What did they say on the Sea of Galilee? There's a ghost. Jesus says, I'm not spirit here. I have a body. Touch it, Thomas. Put your finger here and see my hands. And now he gives him a direct command. Put out your hand. Put out your hand, Thomas. You going to obey him? I'm sure. And place it in my side. And do not disbelieve, but believe. You know, Jesus knows just what to say.
Hey, Chuck,
Yes.
do you think this scenario, for lack of a better word, was trying to prepare them for when he was gone? Like, they're gonna go and say, this happened, and they're gonna obey. Oh yeah, he showed up, and then came later to Thomas.
Jody, it's exactly what your dad was saying, that he is doing everything he can to prepare them, because every single one of them is going to be martyred.
But Chuck,
Save John.
the two men on the road to Emmaus didn't know who he was.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't recognize him.
Yeah. I believe everything he's doing is to prepare them to stand up on Pentecost, to preach that sermon, and then to carry the gospel.
And even to he comes to the disciples and
Yeah.
shows them, and then, they hear, that's not possible, and then we have this encounter a week later that says, yeah, it happened again.
Yeah,
I know it was real.
yeah. Oh, it confirms them, doesn't it?
Right.
All 10 of them.
You start hearing it could be real, you're like, maybe it wasn't.
Starts
You
to
know what I mean?
doubt yourself. How many times did Peter deny?
3.
3. Right? At the supper, I'll never. In the garden, I'll fight till the end. Jesus says, you'll deny me 3 times. Cock crows twice, and they lock eyes across the courtyard. And Peter does what? He starts crying. You've denied him 3 times. And Peter starts crying. Now, a little later, past this point that we're talking about right now, Jesus appears again on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. And Peter and all those workers had been fishing all night. You remember this story? And what does Jesus do? He has a fire and he starts cooking them breakfast. He's got some fish over the coals, and Peter comes to shore. Jesus and Peter, maybe they're walking along the beach together. I don't know. But they have this conversation, don't they? Do you love me, Peter?
I got it.
You know, I love you.
Phileo.
Feed my sheep. Do you love me, Peter?
I got it.
Tend my sheep. You know I love you. Do you love me, Peter?
Phileo.
Lord, you know that I love you.
I got it.
3 times. 3 denials. Do you love me? What do you think that affected Peter? What's Thomas say? I will not believe. Jesus says, you see me? You touch me? Do not be disbelieving, but believe.
That's a bold statement by Thomas. I mean,
It's-
everything you think about it,
We make them all the time.
that's a bold statement.
Out of pride, out of anger, we make bold statements. Thomas made bold statements.
And you know, Chuck, that's human
Yes.
thinking versus spiritual thinking, and that's where we really get messed up a lot of times in trying
Perfect.
to reason things from a human
Human.
point of view. You cannot do that.
Humans don't come into locked rooms.
No.
Humans don't rise from the dead, and humans don't say, put your fingers here and here.
They don't walk through into the rooms without opening the door.
I don't. I don't. What does Thomas answer? Do not disbelieve, but believe. Now, I will tell you, there's a lot of folks out there who will say, Jesus was a good guy. I hear that. Jesus was a good guy. Other religions will even go as far as to say, Jesus was a prophet. He was a good guy and he was a prophet. Thomas doesn't say rabbi, but they called Jesus rabbi at times. They called him teacher. They called him, he said, you can call me friend. They didn't say, that's not what Thomas said. Thomas says, my Lord. Well, we have people who are lords at times. You know? I think of English folks who have a king. And he's, in a way, a lord to them. King Charles III, right now, reigns. He's not my king. What does Thomas say? My Lord and my God. Okay, so let's say Jesus is just a man. What should he do here? No. You would correct somebody, wouldn't you? They did this with Peter. Peter had miraculous powers in the book of Acts. People wanted to worship him, and Peter would say, no, stand up. I'm a man just like you. Did the same thing with Paul and Barnabas. Holy cow, Zeus is here. And Paul and Barnabas both said, no, we're not from the Mount Olympia. We're not gods. We're men just like you. What does Jesus take here? He takes that worship. My Lord and my God. That's relationship. My Lord and my God. And Jesus does not correct him. This is verse 24 and verse 26. Again, paralleled in this story. Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them. Verse 26, his disciples 1 week later were inside again, and Thomas was with them. So what? It's just one word, right? Not. Why? Have you ever even asked yourself, why was Thomas not with them? Right. Did he not know? Did he not get the invitation? They all said, hey, it wasn't just coincidence there. They all said, we're going to gather over off of Gun Highway. We're going to meet at this time. It's going to be at 6 o'clock. We're going to all get in. We're going to shut and lock the door. And we're going to have fellowship one with another. And Thomas says,
It's over.
yeah, y'all are wasting your time. You know what? God doesn't tell me why. Was he sick?
He might have been grieving.
He might have been lying in his bed,
Oh,
crushed, devastated. He may have been dealing with a loved one. I don't know why. God doesn't tell me why. He probably doesn't tell me why, because now I can just fill in the blank. Whatever reason that I want to come up with, he wasn't with them. And what did he miss out on?
seeing Jesus.
He missed out on seeing Jesus. That's a big miss. Do you remember the moment you believed? The moment that your soul was convicted and you said, I believe. A lot of people will think of it as an epiphany. Right? They'll talk about the scales falling off their eyes, the truth hitting their heart, and they say, that's the moment. That was my on the road to Damascus moment. That's what I believe. Did you know that was going to happen when it did? You didn't know. Somebody said something in a lesson or in a life situation, and you said, oh my, I believe. And because of that belief, I'm going to act. And Thomas missed it.
I didn't stick my hand in his fingers.
What's that?
I didn't stick my hand in his.
Well,
my
blessed
fingers
are
in his
you,
hand.
Jimmy,
But
because you haven't seen and believed.
none of us, well, yeah, but none of us have. That's,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of.
Earl is the closest.
I think that's kind of what I can relate to Thomas, is that, why am I gonna believe? I don't see him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what the general public is saying. You're saying Jesus Christ and he's done all these things and yada, 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 but I'm Thomas. I don't believe he's alive.
Uh-huh.
So
Yes, Jim.
it's somehow, prove it to me.
Prove it to me, huh?
Remember the soldier at the cross,
Mm-hmm.
from 6 to 9, darkness.
Yeah.
The curtain in the Holy of Holies in the temple. rent.
Rent.
And the soldier, a Roman soldier, looks and says, he must have been the Son of God,
You must have been.
standing at the cross.
But again, that was a visual.
But this is why we believe, is because of this testimony.
If Thomas was supposed to be there, he would have been there.
That's right.
Everything's perfect.
You know, it's very gracious of Jesus doing this.
You mean a second time?
Yeah.
But
He loved them.
if Thomas though, like, and came from perspective, maybe he was just devastated over all this, I'm sure he was.
Yeah.
And his reaction was very humble when he realized who it was.
Yes.
I mean, it could have been that he wasn't just arrogant, and it might have just been like a protection. I
Yes.
can't go there. I can't believe this is true.
Right.
I've just warned my friend for a week.
Right. Yeah, I don't think of
But
Thomas
he's-
as arrogant.
But he said never. Did he say never?
He did say never.
Unless
So-
But you just saw him raise Lazarus from the dead.
Yeah.
That's different. 'Cause
Just saw that, and he'd been dead 4 days, not just died. He had been in the grave 4 days.
Stinking.
Yeah.
But he wasn't murdered. He died a natural death of being sick. And
Mm.
I wonder if that was what the difference was.
Oh.
They saw him taken away.
Right.
They saw him nailed to a cross.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't, because they didn't follow on it, but they
They knew.
what had happened to him.
Yeah.
I'm sure they were told by God.
Every person in
Right.
Jerusalem knew what
And I
had
think that's a different story when you, I don't know. I thought that too. First, I thought, well, wait a minute, they just saw Lazarus being raised from the dead. But that's not Jesus.
Mhm.
Jesus was killed. Who
Mhm.
would think that Jesus could be killed?
Mhm.
He's the
Yeah.
Son of God. Nobody's gonna kill him.
Which goes to Jody's point. Boy,
Yes.
the Messiah has been,
Yes,
Killed.
how's that possible?
yeah.
But didn't they know the Old Testament saying that a Savior would come?
Well, Isaiah predicted
yeah.
it.
Well, Isaiah 53 would have to be
Okay.
taken into account, yeah, yeah. But see, you had a lot of other passages that were talking about him reigning over the world.
And you also have all those emotions, like it clouds your brain.
Clouds your brain, yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Thomas got a gift. He got a gift.
Jesus could have said, yeah,
Yeah.
after he said, let
But he
me.
knew his heart.
I know.
Yeah. Instead of electing one named Matthias, they could have elected two. Yeah. But Jesus said, God promised, I won't lose any of these, save the son of perdition. Right. Yeah.
Chuck, could it be, and you know how my brain goes into the rabbit hole. Here is Thomas and even the apostles, all of them, and the guard that Jim was talking about. It was still all visual. They were validated. The whole thing was validated by a visual confirmation. Could it be that the same thing happens to us, but we just don't recognize it? That we actually do see Jesus in what is around us, but we don't acknowledge it until someone says something that the Holy Spirit grabs our brain and says, oh,
Mm.
now the scales are coming off.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're hearing what Chuck is saying.
If we balance that with free will, I think, yeah. Yeah. I do want to make another observation here about the situation and how Jesus chose to do this, because it was a choice. In that Jesus did not appear to Thomas on Tuesday by himself, or Wednesday, or Thursday, or Friday. It was when the group came together. Did he do this for Thomas? I don't see how you read the passage and read it any other way
He did.
than that it was done exactly for Thomas and done for us.
It was done for all 12 of them, or 11.
Yeah. But he didn't give Thomas some special private viewing. Why not?
Because the message that he was going to give to Thomas was for all of them.
There is something about the group coming together. There is, when Luther nailed those theses to the door, and that whole Reformation started. A few hundred years in, some very smart people said, you better be careful, because if you take Protestantism all the way to its logical conclusion, every man will be a church unto himself. That individuals will say, I don't need anybody else. It's me and God. Well, Thomas had to get back with the group before Jesus appeared to him.
And vice versa, the group had to get back to Thomas.
Yes.
But you know, those 11, more likely than not, if they were human beings, they had some challenges with what Thomas was doing.
Mhm.
You're being an idiot, you're being a knucklehead, why?
Why not believe?
Can't you see this?
They all knew he was gonna rise. I mean, he told them all along that he would rise on the third day.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that was what you and I was talking about earlier, the book I was talking about.
Yes.
Is those disciples, those apostles were a church,
Mhm.
which is nothing more than a group of people.
A group of people.
They were that, and one of their group, one of their family was having a problem,
Yeah.
having an issue. So.
And they did the best they could,
Jesus
didn't they?
was
They
showing
came
them
to it.
everything, yeah.
Mhm. And said, we've seen him. We've seen him. Over and over. He's alive. He's real. I want to tell you a quick story. Highway 19 and Ridge Road. Do y'all know where that is? Highway 19 and Ridge Road. There's a Walmart there. And if you continue west on Ridge Road, you run into the Gulf. There's a little condominium set there called Sand Pebble. Trundy and I had some relatives that lived in Sand Pebble, so we used to visit. We used to drive past that Walmart to Sand Pebble condominium. And on the side of the road, there was something that I desired. I'm not going to go into what that was right now, but it was something that was for sale sitting in a yard. Okay. And I thought to myself, I'm going to stop and I'm going to talk to that fella. And I did. His name was John. John was a really, really interesting guy. Older fella. Let me tell you how John's mind worked. This is how fascinating John was. John had a garden. He had a pretty big yard because in that area, it's little quarter-acre lots. John had almost an acre, I would think, there by the Walmart. John had a garden. And I stopped and spent time with John talking. And in his garden, he would have a big circle of green beans. And over here, he'd have a big circle of blueberries. And over here, he'd have a big circle of zucchini. And I said, John, why do you plant your stuff in circles? He said, look, if you ever lived on a farm, if you ever grew up on a farm, the plants that are on the end of the row, they suffer. They don't grow right. Either end. Now, it's probably because of fertilizer, watering, issues like that. John thought, that's how his mind was. He thought, I'll just plant everything in a circle and every bush will be strong and healthy. Because it will all get equally watered. Here's another coincidence. John knew Trundy's grandfather.
I was gonna say.
Yes, John knew Tom Higginbotham. That's Trudy's dad. I didn't know that John knew them. He didn't know. It was just dumb luck, right? So, how do you know Tom Higginbotham? Well, he put in my well. That's what Tom and Trundy's dad did. We'd shake down wells, and people would build pumps, and they'd use that to water their lawn. They didn't have to pay extra water bill that way, right? So Tom also knew John, and also Tom was very good about talking about the Lord to every single person. I seen him do it over and over. I used to work with them. Tom was very good about it. He'd come up to an old person, he'd pinch them, and he'd say, hey, what are you going to do with your money when you die? That's exactly how he would open the door every time that I was with him. He'd pinch them, and he'd say, what are you going to do with your money when you die? And Tom and John hit up a friendship. Tom was talking to John about church. Tom would have Gladys bake bread. Excellent way of evangelizing, baking bread. And Tom would bring, he'd say, Gladys, make me some bread. And then he'd go and he'd deliver to different people that he was talking to about God. And he brought bread to John multiple times. Talked to John. I talked to John. John would tell me, I don't need a church. He was the fulfillment of what had been prophesied. I don't need a church. John had been burned by a group. And he was angry. But he says, I don't need a church. That's not the way God made us. God made us for relationship. You're here for the relationship. You're here for that fellowship. It makes us stronger. It gives us a soft place to fall. It gives us encouragement when we need it. Exactly what Thomas needed was to be back with that group.
Beautiful.
Oh, my computer's about to quit.
Very nice to read.
But the sad part there is, I hope to see John in heaven. It's a dead body of water. It's a retention pond. No spring, no river. It's just a dead body of water. I find a lot of this in the world where you're just floating on a raft in a dead body of water. And for a lot of folks, they're just waiting for that raft to pop and die. This is what it is to have no faith, to have no driving spiritual adventure. And that's where I get my grandkids going.
But it's only until those people that exist, it's only until they are facing the inevitable sentence, you're dying. Right?
This is how I see y'all.
Yes.
This is how I see y'all. I see us on a river. I see us in tubes. I see us going towards God. I see us all in the same flow. There's going to be rocks that we bounce up against. There's going to be rocks that we get stuck on. We're going to have to help each other off of those and continue on down the river. That's life for me.
But won't it be joyous to do it together?
Yes.
Together. Lisette's not here, but Lisette's who made me think about this when we were talking a week or two ago about you only live once. And so often that's used, YOLO is used to justify a sin or to justify something, but that's not true. That can be for righteousness too. You only live once. You need to worship as if it's your last time.
You know, Chuck, the lockdown was part of trying to get us away from the family,
Yes.
the church family.
I believe that's exactly what it was. I believe that's exactly what it was. Listen to the words of James, and we will conclude our lesson this morning. James says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we'll go into such and such a town. We'll spend a year there. We'll trade and make profit." It's a good idea. It's a business plan. "Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring." What is your life? You are a mist that appears for just a little time and then you vanish. Burns off every morning. Like that. It's gone. Instead, this is what you ought to say: if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, what is it?
Sin.
For him, he's missed the mark. It's sin.